Okay, where am I from? I am from Buffalo. Actually, grew up in Cheektowaga, just right across the border from Buffalo, and have pretty much lived here all of my life. I went to Canisius College for school. Actually, had hoped to go to another college, and they were not nearly as excited about having me, so I ended up going to Canisius for or what I thought was going to be a year, and then transfer out to that college, and ended up getting a work study job in the public relations office, and it was a photography work study job, and ended up just really liking it, and pretty much stayed the rest of the time. So I've been in Buffalo pretty much all my life. Question 2, where have you been? So I have traveled pretty much throughout North America, Hawaii, Alaska, and then pretty much most of Europe, and throughout Africa, or at least Tanzania, Kenya, and Zanzibar in Africa. So when was I first interested in photography? Well, I think that is sort of a two-part answer. I originally, in high school, was one of the editors on the yearbook, and you'd send somebody out to take pictures at some game or something like that, and you'd count on those for the yearbook. But a lot of times, as high school students are sometimes irresponsible, things didn't get done, so I kind of picked up a camera and just sort of learned to do it myself. I then had taken a communications class in high school again, where I had to do a photo essay for the final project. So for that, I had photographed a Bills game just kind of from the stands, and doing that was something that I really enjoyed, and I think that was maybe the first time the real spark happened in there. And then in college, just back to the previous question, I had gotten a work study job in the public relations office, kind of just by accident. We had a big meeting of various people that were looking for work study jobs, and they would just read off the list, like, who wants to answer phones in the history department, and stuff like that really didn't interest me until they got to the photographer job, and they said, we need a photographer in the public relations office. Is anybody interested? I raised my hand, another person raised their hand, and ultimately they flipped a coin. I won the flip of the coin and ended up going into that office. When I was in that office, I had a person that was above me, I guess another work study that had been there for a few years, and she really taught me how to work in the darkroom, and really helped me get started with all the things that I really didn't know up until that point. So that is how things got started in photography. My first trip abroad was in high school. Did a class trip to France, and I think that's probably one of the places that sparked my passion for travel, especially travel to Europe. I saw that there was really sort of a different pace to life, a different way of doing things. Just a recognition and awareness that there were other things out in this world that interest me, that were different and unique, and I think I just wanted to explore from that point forward. It's interesting. One of my most vivid recollections from that trip was that I never had been a person that really liked fruit in my life. And I remember being in, I think it was Avignon or one of the cities in France, and ended up being hungry and ate an apple or a pear or whatever it was, just a piece of fruit from one of the little roadside markets, and it was like the best piece of fruit I had ever tasted in my life. And I think it was just because, I wasn't used to eating fresh fruit. I was used to eating fruit from the supermarket that, probably was picked when it was not fully ripe, and so it didn't taste quite as good as these things. So that's kind of one of the memories that I always had, and I think that kind of sticks with me, especially as I travel through places like Italy and have an awareness for eating local and doing things with local vendors, that you end up getting stuff that's at its freshest or at its peak. So, again, that goes back to one of my very first memories of traveling. I should also mention that my parents always loved to travel. I remember as a little kid always flying to Florida for spring break or for Easter break at the time. And so this was like the 70s, and commercial air travel, I guess, was sort of just really taking off, pardon the pun there. And so I think I became really fascinated with planes and airports, and being able to get from one place to another very quickly. So that is pretty much how I think I got started with my passion for travel. So something I never leave home with whenever I go abroad. Well, obviously the camera certainly is the one thing that I guess everybody would expect me to say there. I think now it's sort of a different world. I guess I would never go abroad without my iPhone or whatever kind of device ultimately that we're using to communicate with each other. Yeah, I guess those would be the two biggest things that I always have. Again, maybe a computer or something like that. But I think for me, one of the things about going to different places is that I almost feel like I have to have a camera between me and whatever I'm experiencing to I guess fully work out the experience, or fully like sort of capture the experience. I guess the camera forces me to look at things in a much more intimate manner. So I think having that with me is something that is important for me to fully work out the travel experience in my brain, or fully reconcile that. So what's my educational background, and how does this qualify me to lead trips such as this? So I have a bachelor's degree in communications and history. And it's interesting that the history end of things, I really love the history of places. And one of the things I always do before I travel anywhere is I like to read about the history of it and understand the culture, not just from the obvious type of things, but sort of the cultural type of things, and what sort of the trends were that led up to the way the culture is in a particular way in the time that I go there. So I think my fascination with history certainly plays into this a little bit. I also have a master's in fine arts, specifically in photography. So I think that obviously also helps me to be able to share my expertise with other people and help them experience places through their cameras, or at least help them capture what they're seeing and bring that home with them. I think one of the things that I've always heard people say to me is, I go to a place and I experience all this wonderful beauty in the place and I take pictures of it, but the pictures never live up to the beauty of the place. So I think my education and sort of just life training really qualifies me to help people bring home photographs that, give them accurate memories or accurate renditions or representations of the places that they go to, rather than coming home and being kind of disappointed by the imagery that they see. Also, then, what qualifies me for this is I've been teaching travel photography classes at Canisius College for over 10 years. The first time that we ran that class, went to Africa. I'm sorry, not Africa, Alaska, and that was a pretty self-directed thing. It was not like really any kind of educational company that was selling a package trip. It was really me just researching a place and deciding what would be photographically interesting, and then designing a course around that for the students. I was to later do some professional business work in Italy, and in doing that work in Italy, I saw how that might even be a better place for students to do photography. And so I used those trip planning lessons that I had learned through the Alaska class and applied them to Italy. And certainly after now doing Italy for more than 10 years, it really is something that I think I understand a lot better, and certainly from your mistakes and successes over those years, you learn a lot about what interests people, what works for people, and what might not necessarily be something that is interesting. A piece of feedback that goes to that, and how this experience really plays a critical role in that. I used to think Rome was a really important place to go, and this is not a knock on Rome at all, but I would do all these trips with students, and probably at the beginning of the trip, almost all of the students would say that the place that they were most interested in going to was Rome. But then they'd get to Rome, and you go to a place like the Colosseum, which certainly is a spectacular place and visually interesting, but it more often than not doesn't meet people's expectations. It's kind of a tourist trap with everybody trying to sell you something around it. It's plopped right in the middle of sort of a busy road and a busy intersection, and it just ultimately never lives up to the hype of it. So in my travel experience, I've learned lessons from this, and have been able to design trips to go to places that people ultimately wouldn't necessarily think are interesting on the surface, but when you dig down and really start to experience them in a deeper way, you find that they're much more rewarding than places like Rome that certainly are very popular with tourists, but not necessarily always the best places to visit. So what are some of my favorite places at home and abroad? So favorite places abroad, I really loved Zanzibar, which is a little island off the coast of Tanzania. Lots of different things about that place that I really loved. First of all, it has a sense of history there. It was on the Spice Trail. So, you had all these different cultures coming together in this one place. And it's even interesting to see how this tiny little island on the east coast of Africa, you would think that it really had nothing to do with the United States, but it was kind of the hub for the slave trade. And so you learn stuff from this place about my own country and the own place that I live from some place that is thousands of miles away. So that place, for the meeting of all these different cultures, for the exotic nature of it. I love food, and so having all these different spices and stuff like that is also something that is really interesting to me. And then just visually, all the different colors, the landscape, stuff like that is all things that attract me in a big way. Obviously, I love Italy. The thing that strikes me the most about Italy is that you have all of these different kind of geographical types of places in a very short distance away from each other. So, you've got like spectacular beaches, you've got mountain ranges, you've got agricultural areas, you've got really densely populated cities, all in sort of like one clustered in place. Around Naples, you can experience everything from island life to densely populated city to sort of more agricultural, rolling hills type of places, to, spectacular mountainous coastlines. So love that a lot. So favorite places at home, I guess two of the places that I really love in this area is I love the Zoar Valley. I think that's just a spectacular place that again is visually incredible, and in some ways I guess a hidden gem here. I don't think everybody knows about this place, and everybody has a chance to visit it. So I definitely like that. And then I love being at the beach, so I love the whole Crystal Beach area across the bridge here in Lake Erie on the Canadian shoreline. So what's my leadership style? I guess my leadership style, in at least in the travel end of things, is kind of rooted almost in my teaching style, in that I feel like people are going to be in the best position to learn if they're having fun. So as a leader, I try to pick activities that are fun, yet still meaningful from an educational perspective. And I guess that goes back again to the history thing, that I really love history. So if I can make history fun and make a location fun through the use of history, and have people be learning without them, sort of being hit over the head with that this is an educational experience, I guess that would be my biggest leadership strategy in terms of travel, especially with students. I think with adults, it's the same way, just trying to have people do a travel experience, and in this case, a group travel experience, in a way that's really fun. I don't want people to feel like, that they're being marched at, and sort of like an army to places. I want them to feel like that, they're having fun, they're amongst family, they're amongst friends, and enjoying what they're doing. So how can these trips help people develop their photography skills? Well, again, it just goes back to me understanding photography from an educator's point of view, and having seen so many students over my teaching career, which I've actually just celebrated 20 years of teaching, 10 years of travel photography, but 20 years of teaching. I see what kind of mistakes people make, and honestly, 2/3 of the mistakes that they make are easily correctable. They're mistakes that are around composition and use of light, which are easy things to correct. I think the fallacy that most people have is that to become a better photographer, they've got to have better equipment. And I kind of feel just the opposite, that the simpler your equipment is, the better your photography skills are going to be. And especially in the sense that it forces you to rely upon composition and lighting and general aesthetic principles, as opposed to relying upon some sort of trick or gadget that a camera has, or even some sort of effect or filter that could be applied in post-processing in Photoshop or Lightroom or whatever software you're using. So what are some of the perks of traveling with a group, such as the ones you lead? Well, I think that, oftentimes experiencing things as a community are so much more fun than experiencing them on your own, especially when you're talking about shared experiences. You learn not only stuff about the place that you're going to, but the people that you're with. In some ways it's kind of like networking for jobs, except you're networking for travel opportunities, and you're sharing experience with people who enjoy the same things as you. So whether that's drinking wine or eating seafood, when you do those things with other people that enjoy it, I think it just simply makes it that much better. From a logistical point of view, it certainly, traveling as a group is so much more cost efficient, and I guess just sort of makes time fly when you're traveling from point A to point B with new people that you have an opportunity to talk with and learn stuff about them, rather than just kind of sitting on a train seat by yourself, just watching the world pass by. So what do I hope people take away from traveling with me? Well, I think a lot of the things that I've already mentioned here so far. I think one of them is an appreciation for local artisans, whether those are farmers or chefs or just the people that live within an area. I think that when we're in our home or in our home city, that we kind of go through our daily life as almost robots, and we kind of forget to stop and look. And I hate the cliche smell the roses, but that's essentially it. We stop being aware of everything that's around us and how it affects us. So when I travel, and when people travel with me, I want them to have a heightened intimacy with their environment and with the landscape and with the people that are around them. So that is certainly one thing. I think another thing is an appreciation of the visual experience, an appreciation of how we can use visual arts, and I guess primarily photography here, but I think most photography skills can also be transferred to other things. Hopefully after traveling with me, they develop a new personal aesthetic and find a way of sharing images of places that are unique. The photographs themselves, are unique and personal. And I hope that people are able to sort of develop a photographic style that is their own after they've taken one of these classes or one of these workshops or one of these tours, whatever we want to call it. So how is it what you're doing more than giving people a tour of a foreign country? What makes me stand out? Well, that's a great question. I think that, so first and foremost, I think, again, as I mentioned, we're trying to experience places that aren't the ones that you would see if you picked up a typical travel brochure from, any travel agency like the AAA or, whatever you want to call it. I want people to experience a foreign country in a way that locals experience it. I want them to be in ordinary places and experience ordinary people in an extraordinary way. Let me rephrase that. I want people to go to extraordinary places that are ordinary places, meaning that they're just part of everyday life in a place, rather than a place that people come to just as tourists. I think a good example here is we look at Niagara Falls as the place that most visitors would come to if they were, coming from a foreign country to Buffalo and Western New York. And I think there's so many other things to do in this area that I understand from being a local, that, I don't know whether they're better or worse than Niagara Falls, but certainly an experience that I think would be much more intimate, much more personal, much more unique, and one that, you'd come away with pictures that don't look like every single picture of Niagara Falls on the internet. So transferring that to tours of foreign countries, I think that what I would want people to come back with is seeing a place that none of their friends or any other people would have experienced, experiencing food and culture that is new and unique to them, and perhaps again discovering that the way of life that we have in the United States is not necessarily always the best, or it's not the worst either, but it's different, that there's other ways of living out there. And through cultural immersion in these places that aren't always tourist destinations, I think you learn more about those other ways of living in the world. And also, I think you gain a better connection with the global society as a whole. We as Americans, I think we kind of, or North Americans, we kind of think like our way is the best way. And that may not necessarily always be the case. Certainly there's things about what we do in this part of the world that is good and important, but there's also other ways of approaching things, doing things, having points of view, other things. And I think you learn those when you travel and go to other places, and you become a much more richly developed person. And it kind of almost goes back to the Jesuit principles that, I learned at Canisius, is sort of developing the whole person. And to develop the whole person, you really have to, acknowledge your where you are in your own mindset, and then you have to go experience something different, and then reflect upon how those different things have moved you or have changed your life, and then you kind of apply them to your future life, or what you do after these experiences. So, I think that the tour company that I want to develop is one that helps people become better global citizens and better able to express themselves in a world that has a lot of color, a lot of diversity, a lot of different ways of living, different types of people, all different things. And I think that's super important when we are now in a very globally connected world with all kinds of social media and stuff like that. I think more so than ever, it's important that we understand how to see things from the other side, or see things from a different perspective other than our own. So, question 13, how are these experiences related to personal growth and development, in your opinion? I think I just answered that question just a second ago there, so we can just kind of add on to that. And that, I think through travel, it's not sort of through the kind of travel that I want to do with this company is not just going for a vacation and relaxing and chilling out. I want people to certainly have a chance to relax and enjoy themselves, but also I feel like through education, through learning about places, through learning to do a new skill, I hope to make them more developed as human beings, and also have acquired new skills along the way. So what would I say to inexperienced travelers? It's kind of interesting in that probably I would say half of the students that I take on these trips for school are inexperienced travelers, and a lot of them have never even been on a plane before. And I might say that those ones are the ones that probably get the most out of these experiences because they are suddenly made aware again that there's more to the world than we just see in our own neighborhoods and our own houses and our own places. So I would say to inexperienced travelers, fear not. You know, take a chance, dip your toes in the pool. I think that you probably will find that it's something that you are going to really enjoy and something that you'll be happy that you stepped out of your comfort zone to experience. And then last but not least, is there anything else you'd like people to know? Well, again, I just want to reemphasize the point that I feel like I want this tour company to allow people to do stuff that they don't have available to them in other mediums or other kind of travel companies. So that is that.